between Restore Church and Journey and Venture. We're working on something like that. But they also contacted us last month and said, we have an opportunity if you want to help collect some supplies for us for the year upcoming. So every day they provide snacks for the kids that come to their different locations throughout Muskegon. The month of February, we're partnering with those other organizations just to collect some snacks here. So there's a list on the website. You can find things, but just simple, healthy snacks, granola bars, and what are those bagel chip things, stuff like that. We're just going to be collecting throughout the month. That we're going to be giving them to them. So any Sunday this month, drop those off. You can do that as well here. Also, we postponed our chili cook-off last Sunday. There was a really exciting and then really dramatically discouraging football game on last Sunday night. And I think most of us are still living in shock about all that. But we're going to have our chili cook-off at the end of this month instead. So that'll be on February 25th. Looking forward. That's just a chance to connect with others, have a little bit of friendly competition, have some fun as well. So just wanted you to have that on your calendars as well. I just want to thank you for your generosity here as a church. Last week at our partnership huddle, we sort of presented our budget for the year. Partnership is not just like a financial commitment to our church. Partnership is a way to say that you're in on our mission with us as well. And we sort of presented just a modest budget for this upcoming year, but all of that is fueled by your generosity as you respond to what God is doing in your life as well. And I'd encourage you to maybe prayerfully consider taking a step with us on that. If you've never given here, consider maybe a one-time gift or a first-time gift. It's a big step, and we don't want to overlook that. Maybe consider giving here on a recurring basis if you haven't done that yet. And for those of you that have been giving generously on a recurring basis, you are making this happen in our world. And I just want to share one piece of that personally. Now, many of you asked for an update about Steph, how she's doing, and it's been a long couple weeks, and I would say she's doing okay. We're getting through it. It's not fun. And her next surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. And one of the things, obviously, in the back of my mind, not the first thing I'm prioritizing on all of this, but one of the things we've been thinking through is, okay, how expensive is this going to be? And the bills started rolling in this week with a glimpse. And the truth is, it's like over $100,000 in bills from multiple ER visits, multiple surgeries. Like, that's what the estimated bills are going to be. But we started a new insurance plan through Steph's school, and we as a family have tried to follow kind of basic biblical principles of financial stewardship, and we have plenty in savings, and we have an HSA and stuff like that. And the grand story in all that is, all said and done, we're probably going to be out of pocket less than $3,000 for all that. And I say that one is because the one thing we didn't want this to become is a financial burden for us on top of everything else, but also as a church, the one thing we've never wanted to be is a financial burden to you as well. So in the midst of kind of a challenging season, we're just grateful for that. And I would encourage you, if you've never taken Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey, just sets out some basic principles. The one thing, because of the way we live, try to be generous first, save second, and then live on the rest kind of thing. So one piece that we didn't have to worry about, but we know that's kind of unique in this world. But we believe that anybody can take steps to having the same kind of freedom in that and not having to worry about that as well. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of update. Thank you for your generosity, and also encourage you as well to take some steps in that. So there's going to be a little bit of an intermission time. Our kids can go back to the classrooms, grab a cup of coffee, check in with a neighbor, just meet somebody, and then I'll be back up here in just a second. as we continue our series, The Way, we've been exploring the book of Acts, and we've been seeing how it's not just the stories of the past where God was working thousands of years ago, but where he invites us in to participate and what he continues to do in our world as well. And this morning we're going to be in Acts chapter 12, and if you've got your phone and you want to join us on the Bible app, or if you brought a Bible with you, we're just going to be reading through the Acts chapter 12 this morning. And the truth is, Acts chapter 12, of all the chapters of Acts, is the one that some of the scholars and authorities say it's almost like a Passover chapter. Like, it doesn't actually even make 100% sense in the context of what's happening in the church. But when I read Acts chapter 12 and what I want to share with you this morning, I think it has a real clear purpose for why this chapter is part of the story of Acts. Because what we've been looking at is how the book of Acts was first what God was doing in the small community of followers of Jesus. They were Jewish, and God was transforming their lives and their community. And the good news of Jesus started to spread to the outside community. And last week we looked at how it became good news for the Gentiles, the outsiders, the ones that were supposed to be outside of God's love and his covenant as well. And it became good news to the entire ends of the world. And we're going to look in the rest of the book of Acts how that continues to spread. And it's going to change world history, and it's going to change the lives of people both close to Jerusalem and to the ends of the earth as well. And then there's chapter 12 here, and I think it's got a real clear point for us when it comes to prayer. And I just want to let you know that on top of everything going on, we have felt your prayers, and we have had people that have communicated to us across the country and actually across the world that they've been praying for our family through this season. And there are moments as a pastor that I know the only way I get through sometimes days or messages is by the grace of God and the presence of his Spirit and your prayers as well. So I just want you to let you know what we sense them, and we know them, and we're grateful for your prayers through this season as well. And there's so many things that we continue to pray for together. One of the things that somebody asked us to be praying for, and one of my wife's responses, well, I got nothing but time to pray while I just kind of sit here in bed. So there's one of the bright spots in the midst of all this. But I want to ask you this question: what do you think would happen if people just stopped praying? What do you think would happen in our world, in our lives, in our community, in our country? And I'm not just talking like a few people like kind of get lazy and stop praying, but like, what if we just shut off the prayer mechanism? I think it's an interesting thing to think through, and I want to look through that this morning. But I think it's interesting to say, like, if we stop praying, would everything go haywire? If people stop praying, would God abandon us? If we stopped praying, would things just go along as normal? Would it make any difference? Like, I think when you think about that, what difference does prayer make, and what does it change about our reality and our world? When I was a kid, I think I was about 7 years old, I went to my pediatrician's office, and they did the standard eye exam. You look through the little machine and you read the letters or whatever the shapes are, or whatever that is. And I looked at the nurse who was giving me this eye exam, and I said, "There's like a smudge on the lens of this thing, and it's blurry. Your machine is blurry." And she's like, "Yeah." And they write up my vision as something less than normal and send me to an optometrist where I've got to get my eyes dilated. And if you've ever been through this, it's not a real fun process. Not terrible, but then I get headaches. So the sun is bright that day, and I got to wear these little sunglasses. I'm getting a headache, and I'm just really annoyed about this whole thing because it was their machine that was blurry. And I told them that, and they didn't believe the 7-year-old, and they made me go through this whole process. And guess what the optometrist said? He said, "You have 20/15 vision. So what most people can see at 15 feet, you see at 20 feet. You have better than 95% of people walking the planet. That's your vision." I said, "I know." I told them the machine was wrong, and I was so annoyed. And to this day, I'll probably never quite trust an optometrist or anything like that. You could probably come poke my eyes out right now, and I'd probably still say, "You're the one that's blind, and I can still see fine." I don't know. It gave me a little bit of a complex there, but there's not maybe a lack of self-confidence at times in my life, to the point that I also believe that if I have better than normal vision, that means all of my offspring probably have superhero vision as well. And so when we get the the exam back from school that says your kid failed the eye exam. I'm like, I'm sure the machine was just blurry, or whatever that looks like. And our youngest was struggling with that a little bit, and so we took her to the optometrist, and they did an evaluation. They said, actually, she's got pretty bad vision, and she needs both some treatment and some corrective lenses. And through that, I'm like, how's this possible? I've got like these superhero vision genes. How did that happen to her? And I struggle with that because the doctor's like, it has nothing to do with any of that. Just her eye formed different, and there's nothing you could or contribute to any of it. And I still struggle to understand it until the last time she went to her appointment. I put her glasses on. I don't know why I hadn't done this in the year previous, but I looked at her glasses. I'm like, I can't see anything. And I just realized just how blurry her vision really was and how much she was missing through that. I'm grateful that she's gotten treatment, and because of the treatment that she's gone through and the lenses she has, she can see normally now. But I struggled to really understand and relate to what that looks like because I've got a complex and all this baggage and stuff like that. But the reality is sometimes we need a lens to see things clearly. Sometimes we don't see the world as it is or as it should be without some correction and without a lens to look through that as well. Or as we jump into Acts chapter 12, I just want you to see what's going on here. And I think this chapter gives us a lens through which we can see the world and understand what God is doing. It starts like this. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. When he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So we start to see that persecution breaks out amongst the early church. James is executed. He is martyred, the second martyr after Stephen, for the cause of Jesus in the world. Peter, who is considered one of the loudest voices for the church and one of the leaders for the church, is arrested and imprisoned. And I would think that it would be easy for that first community of followers of Jesus to ask a lot of questions, to feel like even though they are certain of who Jesus is and what he's done, that it might feel like the ground under them is a little unsteady, that there are forces of evil and darkness out against them. And it would be easy to have lived in fear. In that time, it would be easy to live in a state of unsettledness. And I just want to say that because I actually think that it relates a lot to what so many people are going through right now in our world. And I think when we think about what they were going through, it helps us maybe put things in perspective about what's happening right here, right now in the 21st century in our community. It doesn't make it easier, but I think maybe we can take some encouragement from their story. Like I think about it this week, I've had multiple close contacts report a family member was just diagnosed with cancer this week and waiting for the diagnosis. I've had multiple people say so-and-so is in the hospital and we're not sure, would you pray? And I've had multiple people this week lose a family member. I've had multiple reports just this week of a family splitting up and stuff like that. And I know that so often we want to avoid this stuff at all costs, and it just feels like so much of this for so many of us is so unavoidable right now. God, would you just make it stop because it hurts too much. And it's too hard to maintain hope in the midst of all the struggles and the suffering. And you go beyond that, and we're in an election year, and we know we're just at the beginning of what is going to be just a disaster in our community. And then you think about some of the economic, financial forecasts for our country, and it just feels like the earth is shaking under our feet almost. And you kind of say, what's going to hold me up, and what can I cling to, and Where can I find hope in the midst of struggle and turmoil? And I think these first followers of Jesus, one of their leaders is arrested. Another one of their leaders was just executed. They know that the guy that rules over their community is out to get them. And so what's their response? What do? It says this in verse 5. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. Their response isn't to run away, isn't to try to fight. Their response is to pray. And I think about our own world. There's so many ways when we experience challenges and adversity and hardship and brokenness and loss and suffering. There's so many different ways that we can respond. And you say, what's the solution to this? Some would say, take the path of numbing themselves. Alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, just like make the feelings go away. Some people take the approach of trying to distract themselves. Stay busy, have fun, pretend it's not there. Like you stay, as long as you stay going, you don't pause to think about what's happening in our world, maybe it will go away. Some people prepare to escape, if you will. I've got an uncle that lives outside of Las Vegas, and he texts me consistently. He's got his go bag ready, and he's got survival school that he's working on, and he's building a ham radio station and all these things. And he's 75 years old. I'm like, if it all ends tomorrow, how long you got? I don't understand any of it. But that's what he's investing in, is thinking that we all, if you're not prepared for the Russian invasion and the end of days, that you're missing the thing. There's different solutions to all of this. But the way that we see the early church respond is not to try to numb themselves or to distract themselves or to try to escape any of it. They sit in real presence. They know the challenges in front of them, and they earnestly prayed. They prayed for God's will to be done. They prayed for rescue for Peter. They prayed that the good news, the hope of the gospel might spread to even those jailers in their community. And I ask maybe if we've lost something in our church. And I don't just mean Venture Church or Muskegon churches. I actually mean like the church in America. Because you think about all the prevalence of churches. Like there are some parts of our country where there's churches on every corner of the city block. And churches have political influence at times, and churches have TV networks and websites, and some churches have hundreds of millions of dollars in assets. And yet I think if we're really honest, I think the church in America is virtually powerless to influence and change our society. For as many Christians as there are, and as many churches there are, and many leaders, like it feels like this ship that we're on is headed towards an iceberg, and it feels like there's nothing we can do about it. And you ask yourself, why is that? Because there's so many assets, so many resources, so many places of influence. But I would say one of the things I would point to is I think the church has lost its earnestness in prayer. And that doesn't mean that we can't be a church like that, or there aren't churches like that out there. I believe that there are groups of followers of Jesus here in our community, in our country, and around the world, that their number one priority in life is prayer. And I think that's what sustains God's grace in our lives sometimes. But for the most part, we have given ourselves to programs, speakers, videos. Like if you think about how we use our time in our day, most of the time we treat church, we treat faith like a little bit of like a cruise ship experience. The comedian wasn't funny enough, so I'll go check out the dancers or whatever it is. We just kind of move on to the next thing. But what we see from the people in Acts is that prayer is what fuels the church. That if they are a machine, if they are a vehicle, and they're headed somewhere on mission and on purpose, we see that the gasoline in their engine, if you will, what makes it all go is prayer. And prayer is what changed it all. It goes on to say this in the next few verses. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains. and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." And Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. How do you explain that one? You're Peter. Okay, I had all these guards guarding me. I was actually chained to some of them. And now I'm free. Free of the guards, free of the shackles, free of the bars and the gates that held me in. How do you explain that one? And the reality is that anybody who is living by faith and fueled by prayer, they all have weird God stories. And you have some of them too, and I have some of them in my own life. Like this week, I was thinking about a friend of mine that I just found out his wife was diagnosed with cancer, and I was thinking about him as I'm driving. And I think sometimes when you think about prayer, you think you have to go to a certain kind of location or closet or sit in a certain kind of way and say certain words. You can pray wherever you're at. And I'm on the highway, and my friend comes to mind, and I start praying for him and his family. And I concluded that as soon as I got to where I was going, I was going to just text him, just let him know I was praying for him. And as I'm pulling into the parking lot where I'm supposed to be, his vehicle is right there. And he's sitting in there. And I couldn't talk real long because we're in opposite lanes of traffic, if you will. But I just looked at him and said, "I was just thinking about you." Explain that how you want. Coincidence, good timing. It's a weird God story to me. Or somebody that had just come to mind, the Spirit of God brought him to mind. Not somebody that I see on a regular basis. And I happened to run into him right before I get to the place that I was headed. I think back to when I was 17 years old. I was in a season of my life. Matt, I was in a time in my life. He says I use the word season too often. I'll change. But a stage in my life where God was opening my heart to what he might want to do in my life. I was seeing him change my friends' lives with the good news of Jesus. And yet I was also scared about what the future might hold for me, and I was wrestling with a lot. And I was in the woods of northern Michigan. I was with some of the teenagers from my youth group and some of the youth leaders that were with us, and we were away for the weekend just as a chance to maybe connect with God and maybe grow in a relationship as well. And if you know me a little bit, you know that I need time by myself as much as I need time with people. That's where I connect with God the most of my life. And I had this little flashlight with me, and this is just a weird story, and I don't know how to explain it. But I was walking in the woods, and I was holding my flashlight like this with my hand over the lens. I have no idea why I was doing this. But I was alone in the woods. I could hear other people, but I couldn't see anyone else. And I was praying. I was praying that God might work in my friends' lives, that God might work in my life, that he might show me what he wants from me in my life. And I looked out, and this flashlight is projecting what I can only perceive as the shape and the image of an angel on the snow. I can't prove any of this to you. I didn't take a picture of it. I've got nothing else to say. It's a weird God story. But in my life, in a moment where I was just in a prayerful situation, I got this sense that God was communicating to me that he's with me. And I'm beloved, and I'm favored, and I'm chosen, and he's got good plans for my life. And I broke down. But this is going back to what's happening to Peter, because he's got one of these weird God stories too. And if you haven't had an experience like this, I guess what I would challenge you is, are you really open to experiencing something that God might show you that's hard to explain to anybody else? And when you do share, it just sounds weird. Because here's Peter in this situation. And we see that he's got this strange story, and he actually goes and he has to try to explain it. This is Peter's explanation. He says, "Then Peter came to himself and said, 'Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. And Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter's at the door. What a friend." Hey, he's here. I'm just going to leave him out there. Like, what a weird situation. And they looked at her and said, "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, "It must be his angel." But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. "Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this," he said, and then he left for another place. This is a whole story. It's just weird. And sometimes we just like, what are we supposed to do with this? Like, did it really happen? Or was one of the prison guards actually a Christian and he was conspiring and he let him out? Like, there's all kinds of ways we could try to explain this maybe in a little bit of a different way. But the reality that Peter sees is God is at work, and it's God's hand that has rescued him and freed him. And he gives God the credit for it. And at the same time, when this is all playing out, the first followers of Jesus that were huddled in a room together behind a locked door, probably out of fear that they might be found and arrested or persecuted as well, say, that can't be true. And there's this fine line, because sometimes Christians are weird just for the sake of being weird, and that's just the reality of it. I'm not trying to encourage you just to be weird for the sake of making people think you've lost your mind or anything like that. But there are sometimes when you are a person that believes that heaven has crashed into earth through the person of Jesus, and that he has given us his Spirit that is continuing to work thousands of years after the fact in this world. If you're a person that's willing to take that kind of leap of faith, which is what it is, you're going to see the world differently. And there are aspects in which you are going to have weird stories that to normal people just, they don't make sense. And that's okay. So I think one of the things that we see is, one is we see what's happening in Peter's life. It's just another one of these stories where Peter experiences God at work, and he gives him the credit. And for these first followers of Jesus, he basically said, hey, don't make a big deal about this. Yeah, God has been doing, but we don't need to go preach the story of me being set free from prison. They continue to still preach the good news of Jesus. And what we see through this is that if you go back to what Peter's been through and what happened in the story, we see that prayer is the lens through which we see God at work. How does Peter understand this story? How do those first followers of Jesus understand this story? Well, because they were praying. They didn't see this as just something weird. They didn't see this as just some coincidence. They saw the presence and activity of the Spirit of God in their midst, and they gave him credit for that. And yeah, you might think about somebody and run into them 1 minute later, and you could say it's a coincidence or a manifestation, or you can say maybe God is doing something that I don't even fully understand. And when we're fueled by prayer, I think we see God at work more and more in our lives. And we maybe experience some of these things. This is how the chapter concludes. It says this in the verses that come. It talks about how Herod got word of Peter's escape. He makes a command that the prison guard should be executed. If you want to know what kind of a king or a leader he was, when something goes against him, anybody that might be at fault dies, if you want to know what he was like. And then it goes on to how he carries on some other business with some people that had been giving him some trouble. And it says this in verse 21, on the appointed day, Herod, wearing his royal robes, sat on his throne and delivered a public address to the people. They shouted, "This is the voice of a God, not of a man." In other words, they were flattering him. Immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died. I don't know if you like that outcome or not. I don't know. Good justice, or is like, what the heck is This is a weird chapter. Why don't we skip Acts chapter 12? And the interesting thing is Josephus, a historian from that time, actually documents Herod's death like this. So it's not just a weird Bible story, some analogy for what happened. He died. Sort of instantly, or maybe after a couple of days, and they say that perhaps the sickness that got him caused an infection that actually does come with something, like maybe a tapeworm, ringworm, something like that. And it's one of the things that points to the accuracy of the scriptures. But why is that part of the story? And it's another weird part of the story. But I think one of the things that we see about it is even that most evil people that walk the planet can't stop the work of God in our world. It says in verse 24, but the word of God continued to spread and to flourish. Herod had nothing but evil in mind for those first followers of Jesus. To whatever extent he could, he would persecute, imprison, execute as many of them as he was able. And yet, because of his arrogance, because of his pride, because of his unwillingness to humble himself before an almighty God, he was snuffed out from the face of the planet, eaten by worms. And so I go back to that question, what if we stopped praying? What if just people across the earth, whatever that button is that controls prayer, just we push the stop button on it, and nobody prayed anymore? It's a theoretical question. I don't really know what the answer is. I believe in the sovereignty of God. I believe God can do what God wants to do, regardless of how we respond to it, and regardless of what we're praying. Anything, God is sovereign over it all. But would he? I will say this, I don't think we would see God's activity if we weren't praying. That God could continue to work behind the scenes, God could continue to do whatever he wants in the world. I'm just not sure we would see it anymore. That we would miss out on his goodness and his holiness and his righteousness in the midst of his activity in this world. We would miss seeing out in the way that he spares us from so much and how he blesses us in so many ways. I think we would miss it all along. I don't know that God would stop working based on our prayers. But I do believe we might stop being able to see it. This is what it says in the Old Testament. 2 Chronicles verse 7 says this. God is talking to Solomon after he built the temple. The Lord appeared to him at night and said, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a temple for sacrifices. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command locusts to devour land, or send a plague among my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins and I will hear their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. There's ways in which these days that we're living through seem sort of inevitable and too much, too hard. But I don't think the solution is just to numb ourselves to them or distract ourselves from them or try to run away from them. I think the only solution given to us by heaven is to humble ourselves in prayer. It's the only way we'll see that God is doing so much more than we can even imagine, even in these days. And I will tell you, living through the last couple of weeks and even living through this season of cancer diagnoses and death and loss and longing, so much more than any one person should have to handle on their own, I can tell you this. I am grateful for the ways that God continues to draw you and me closer to himself in the midst of it. And our hope is that this life is not the end, that Jesus has rescued us and made us a way, and he loves us as we are, and he wants to hear from us, wants to know what we're going through, and he's invited us to experience an incredible relationship with himself through prayer. And I'll tell you this, prayer is not complicated. You don't have to have all the right words, a certain kind of education or training. You could talk silently, or talk out loud, like you're talking to any friend. God is listening, and he's hearing, and when we're fueled by prayer, we see him at work in our lives beyond our wildest imagination. So I'm going to pray for us as the band comes up and wraps up a couple songs. But I also want to invite you after service. I'll be up front here. Aaron's available. If you just want somebody to pray with you, we'll be here. We'll pray with you. Whatever's going on in life, we want to be a church that is witnessing what God is doing as we are fueled by prayer as well. Would you pray with me? God, it is okay to stand out in this world, to be different, to maybe be considered weird by other people, but we don't want to be considered weird because of our own personality quirks or our own decisions. We want to be considered perhaps weird because we're people that see heaven breaking into our midst. We want to be considered weird because we are people that believe that you've been at work for thousands of years and you continue to work now. We want to be weird because we're not people that see coincidences or manifestations, but we want to be people that see your hand at work, changing lives, changing families, changing communities. And we want to be considered weird because ultimately our hope is beyond this life. That come what may, we want to turn our hearts to you. We want to lift our voices to you. We want to seek you. God, we want to ask that you would have your will in our lives, in our church, in our community. You would heal us, that you would heal our land. We would be a people that are fueled by prayers to you. We love you. We give you thanks. The hope we have in Jesus. Amen.
We're going to end the service by singing a couple of songs. I invite you to stand and sing with us.
Broken place within my darkest days, as my fears arise, Lord, I cry out your name. The storm I face bows down to you. When my spirit's crushed and my heart is torn, you rebuke the wind and lead me to the shore. The storm I face bows down to you. In every trial that I face, I claim the promises you make. I turn my wandering eyes to you. On this day I find strength as I call out your name. I find hope through you, Lord, as I sing out your praise. I turn my eyes to you, Jesus. I turn my eyes to you, Jesus. Give me faith to see and help my unbelief in the mysteries of the grace you've given me. The storm I face bows down to you. In every trial that I face, I claim the promises you made. I turn my wandering eyes to you. On this day, I find strength
shadows of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and
Be my vision in the mystery. Lead me to your heart. In the waiting, I will listen.
show me
Where you are.
through the highs and lows. All my life is yours. I will praise you anywhere. Love won't let me down. You're my solid ground. Full of faith, I will declare. I will trust you in every season. God, I will trust you. Withholding nothing, I'm letting go. Your ways are better. God, I will trust you.
You are present in my questions. Help me to believe. I remember all you promised. You are all I need.
Through the highs and lows, all my life is yours. I will praise you anywhere. Love won't let me down. You're my solid ground. Full of faith, I will declare. I will trust you in every season. God, I will trust you. Withholding nothing, I'm letting go. Your ways are better. God, I will trust you. When I'm thrown into the fire, even in the midnight hour, you can do anything. You will lead me through the test. In your providence I'll rest. Great is your faithfulness. When I'm thrown into the fire, even in the midnight hour, you can do anything. You will lead me through the test. In your providence I'll rest. Great is your faithfulness. And I will trust you in every season, God. You are greater than every mountain, God, you are greater. All powerful, your grace is enough. Your love surrounds me, God, you are greater. You're greater. I know, for sure you are greater. Your ways are higher, your plans are better. Your ways are higher, yeah, your plans are better. Your ways are higher, your plans are better. Your ways are better. When I'm thrown into the fire, even in the midnight hour, you can do anything. You will lead me through the test. In your providence I'll rest. Great is your faithfulness. I will trust you in every season, God, I will trust you. Withholding nothing, I'm letting go. Your ways are better, God, I will trust you. You are greater than every mountain, God, you are greater. All powerful, your grace is enough. Your love surrounds me, God, you are greater. You're greater. And thanks a lot for joining us this morning. Again, if you would like prayer, Braden and I will be up here at the front of the stage for a few minutes. Otherwise, I'll see you next week right here as we continue our series, The Way. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.